My name is Lynn Roberts, and I'm here at Square Books in Oxford, Mississippi, and we are very pleased to welcome you to this virtual event for Denise Kiernan's new book, which is a very long title. That is We Gathered Together, A Nation Divided, a President in Turmoil, and a Historic Campaign to Embrace Gratitude and Grace, published by Dutton. You may make some assumptions about that title, but we're going to talk more about it in just a minute. Just a little bit of housekeeping and announcements first. Only the panelists' microphones and videos are on, so if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A, and we'll get to many of those questions as we can during the event. Square Books has a very active schedule of virtual events. You may see announcements for those by visiting our website, squarebooks.com. There you may also sign up for our email newsletter, which is called Speed Reader. We also post events and other book news on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. On our YouTube channel, you can see recordings of our past events. Our next event and our last event for the year, well, so far, will be on Wednesday, December 2nd, and that will also begin at 5 p.m. Central. Karen McManus will be discussing her new book, The Cousins. So now to the main event for tonight. Denise Kiernan is an author, journalist, and producer. Her last book, The Last Castle, was a New York Times bestseller, a Wall Street Journal bestseller, and most importantly to us, an IndieBound bestseller, which is a recording of what people buy from independent bookstores, not box stores. So no one ever bought Denise's books at Square Books along with a case of toilet paper. Previous title, The Girls of Atomic City, was also a bestseller and has been published in many languages. She's worked in television. She was the head writer of ABC's Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which I love that fact. And has produced for other media outlets like ESPN and MSNBC and independent productions. Joining Denise in conversation tonight is Kelly AuCoin. He is an actor. He's most recently played Dollar Bill Stern on Billions and Pastor Tim on The Americans. We'll see if he'll channel those tonight. Really
if I get a little schizophrenic.
Oh, it's such an honor to host y'all both, and we look forward to this holiday. We're 1 week away. I feel like we ought to have like a little timer ticking down the minutes to Thanksgiving, which I think we're all looking forward to. So congratulations on another fantastic book, Denise, and thank y'all so much for joining us.
Well, certainly. Thanks for having me as your guest. You awesome writer person, you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Square Books, what you guys do for authors and readers and independent businesses. Just thank you guys so much. I have such incredible memories of everything I've ever had published there. And thanks, Kelly, for being game to do this and join me in this nutty virtual bookstore world that I'm in, that I've never been in before. But hey, welcome. Yeah.
Welcome to my living room. I wrote a book.
Welcome to my Zoom corner. Hello.
My Zoom corner. Yeah, I know. We all have our Zoom corners. This is my desk. And they were watching me ahead of time. Like I had too many pictures up and it was showing like the fact that I had a ring light. And I was like, well, that's too obvious, taking it down. But we're all adapting. And by the way, I have never been to Square Books, but because I've never been to that part of the country. But I did a lot of research, and you guys are amazing.
Oh, yeah.
I can't wait to visit and come by. Everybody shop, locals shop, small bookstores, And if your local store, if you move away from your local store, order from them and they'll ship them to you. It's you guys are amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, it's for writers, for artists, for so many people who, exist in the creative space. These independent bookstores, these independent businesses are a lifeline, and they give, most importantly, they give an incredible amount of money to communities and support communities and tax dollars. And it is a good way to live when we sort of feel like the world is kind of, getting a little difficult to live in. I know I feel really grateful for my local bookstore, and I feel so grateful to be a part of the larger bookstore community in the United States. And Square Books for me has been a big part of that for a long time. So yay, and thank you. Yes. Yay. Hi, Kelly.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm whatever. Here I am.
You have your cocktail?
Oh, I do. I do. My ice is melted, but yes, I have.
Okay. Yeah, I have my my martini with lemon, a little twist of lemon. Although I think this time of year I'm gonna shift over to olives soon. It feels like
I've got
winter.
some. My favorite are the blue cheese stuffed olives. Those are my favorites.
I have yet to do that. Now, are you a vodka martini drinker or an actual martini drinker?
I can appreciate an actual martini, but I'm a Tito's girl. I just
okay.
But for the most part, I mean, if I had to choose a cocktail, it would be a Manhattan, and I don't have one right now. But I'm a Buffalo Trace perfect Manhattan. So Buffalo Trace.
Okay.
Rye vermouth, some sweet vermouth.
Oh, you like it perfect. That's great.
Yes.
Yeah, when I used to drink Manhattans, that was it was always perfect as well. And I feel like I traded up. My first bourbon that I loved was oh God, what was it? It was Knob Creek.
Oh yes, sure, Knob Creek.
And,
yeah.
And then I went up to Bullet, and now I have found the perfect bourbon. The perfect bourbon is Michter's. Michters.
Oh yes, love Michter's.
Delicious.
Michters. I'm a big Buffalo Trace fan, but it's hard to get your hands on that and Eagle Creek, same distillery. Tricky.
They're all good. Yeah. Yeah. But
how are you hanging in with the pandemic?
We're okay. We're in Brooklyn. We were the epicenter of the epicenter for a number of months in March and April. Things have subsided over the summer because people actually wore masks and they distanced and they followed guidelines. It is spiking, as we knew it would, in the cold weather and as people have gone back to school and probably relaxed a little bit through fatigue and through magical thinking. So there's some shutdowns to be had. We're figuring it out. And this Zoom has been surprising. It doesn't replace the real, but it has been surprisingly intimate and surprisingly a nice way to connect with people. How about you in Asheville?
We are down here in Asheville, North Carolina. We are, we're hanging in, it's funny because I work at home as a writer, and most people sort of thought, well, this is easy for you. You've always worked at home, but they don't understand that those of us who are usually almost completely isolated, those little bits of human interaction were so important to me. And, the minute I can go outside, all I want to do is just hug people till they literally burst. Like I keep thinking of Willy Wonka when Violet swells up and they're going to take her to the juicing room. And I'm like, I'm going to squeeze people like they're Violet and Willy Wonka, and they're going to burst like a berry.
You want to juice them.
Yeah. You got to juice them. And, but we're fine, and so much of, what's funny about my book, We Gather Together, is it was, conceived and tweaked and written and edited before all this happened.
Oh, wow.
And, then it lands in this world and you think, oh my gosh, okay. So I'm going out with a book called We Gather Together in a world where the phrase social distancing is a thing. But I think the message of gratitude and kind of coming together and finding things to be thankful for in the midst of incredible turmoil and strife is something, we can all kind of connect to and value. It's hard. I find it
Of
hard.
course. Yeah. You know what I'll say? That's surprising to me that it was written before, as I like to call it, the great bullshit started. But yeah, because in rereading your intro, it seems absolutely relevant to everything we're going through right now. A polarized nation, a polarizing presidential campaigns up and down the ballot, and the pandemic, and maybe it seems maybe it's even more applicable now of this moment, because it makes you remember what this is not, and not in a depressing way. It really isn't. But like it makes you appreciate what we don't have right now. And when it comes back, and it will, we're not going to take these things for granted. And I was so moved. Can I just to say something and ask you a question?
Yeah.
I was so moved by the prologue because it speaks the idea of your descriptions of being places not home, not in not necessarily your birth family,
Yeah.
chosen family, being in places where you just try to make a Thanksgiving a place where you can just give thanks. Small T Thanksgiving you talk about. And that is our Thanksgiving. We've had a potluck Thanksgiving with friends here for 20 years in Brooklyn, and we usually have 18 to 22. We may, depending on what the regulations are, we're going to have an outside version of about 10. But it is my absolute favorite holiday because it's intentional when you go about it that way. And I know that's not everybody's experience, but I was just so moved by your descriptions of where you were. Can you talk about that? I mean, was that? Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you use the word intentional because as I've been talking about this book and this holiday this year in 2020, I've talked a lot with people about moving from obligation to intention. And so not thinking about, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to invite this person, we have to have this conversation because it's Thanksgiving. But instead, we have to pare down, we're going to hunker down. Who do I intend to connect with? Who do I intend to spend time with, have a conversation with? And, Thanksgiving for me, for my whole lot as well, totally my favorite holiday. And in the beginning of We Gather Together, I talk about trying to have Thanksgiving in both Rome and Paris, because I've lived abroad several times in my life. And
very funny.
It's funny because, you sort of feel most American or whatever your nationality is when you're outside of your country. So, there I was, both in Paris and in Rome, especially in Rome, running around. I lived there for years, running around trying to find cranberries.
I love that story.
We're going to have, we're going to find. And then I just thought, I was like, why am I doing this? Why do I care? And, it was this idea that this holiday really, really meant something to me. And I had bad memories about it. I had great memories, about it. Usually in our house, me and Joe, and he's lurking in the chat somewhere, putting in,
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Joe. So me and Joe, Thanksgiving is a blowout at our house. We have a huge meal and usually a ton of people on Thursday. And then on Saturday, we have this big, leftover party. and I make white bean chili with leftover chili. Oh yeah. And when I make my stuffing on Thanksgiving Day, I do them in muffin tins. So I make stuffing muffins. And then when you put them in the fridge, yeah, I know. No, you don't even know. So you put them in the fridge as leftovers, and then you cut them in half, and the stuffing is the bread for a turkey slider. Yes. And it's awesome. It's so delicious. And just people come by with their kids and their friends, and we have leftovers, and we put the tree up, and we start putting ornaments on, and none of that is happening this year.
Right, of course.
Okay. That's okay, because I'm, super thankful that I have a job and I have a house and I don't have a virus. So jackpot, right? In this world, jackpot. When I think about how Thanksgiving came to be, so I was so obsessed with Thanksgiving, and then, I came across the story of Sarah Josepha Hale and her, she was the daughter of a Revolutionary War veteran. She had grown up with memories of Thanksgiving that were, not always on the same day. At Thanksgiving in the early 19th century was kind of, one state would have Thanksgiving on this day, another state would have Thanksgiving on this day. And she just became obsessed with the idea that the entire nation should come together and have a day of thanks on the same day. And, this was a widowed mother of 5 kids who had no formal schooling and became a really influential editor who just became obsessed with this idea of creating a day of thanks. And I think about that kind of like dedication and tenacity. And I don't know, I just became obsessed with this character. You're an actor. Are there certain characters that just like jump out at you and grab you? Or in turn, historical people, things like that. What kind of pulls you in?
Yeah, certainly a story like hers would pull me in. It's funny with me. I love history, and so actually being, and my wife introduced me to Turn. She was obsessed with Turn. Every time I say that, she's like, "I wasn't obsessed. I just really liked it." So sorry, honey. So to be able to be, and I had some friends on the show, and so to be able to be a part of that was great. In the final season, just under the gun. But generally, what speaks to me as an actor, either a play that has a really interesting message, and then I'll take something that's maybe even more functional in terms of a role, if I really believe in the piece and the project as a whole, or a director. It was a woman I worked with on a piece that I didn't know what the play was. I didn't understand it. I didn't get it, but I was like, I want to work with you because she was awesome, and I took that plunge. Or it's a role where you really get to play with an ensemble, and this is another reason why this book speaks to me, because the only award I've ever won in acting was a Outstanding Ensemble Award for a play I did about 5 years ago. And that you couldn't give me a better award, because that is what acting is all about for me. It's not only, it's the communities you create. And when I got into it in junior high and grade school, it was because this room where we all felt comfortable with each other, we could let our freak flags fly, Yeah. And that's still the case today. Like, I love tech, 10 out of 12s, where you're in the rehearsal for a week, every hour of every day, except when you go home and go to sleep, and everybody's napping on top of each other. And I love that. And on stage when you're connecting, and it's about community. And fundamentally, you're talking about community. You're talking about ensemble, and even before the pandemic, we were aware that we were lacking that in this country. We were trending the opposite way. But I do think it has made those who seek it and understand that we're lacking it. It has made them double down in searching for it and trying to demand it in their lives, and that is a hopeful thing to me. And so, and I think you're one of those people because you wrote a book about it, for Christ's sake.
Well, Hope, I mean, I love that you mentioned Hope because, and you're talking about ensembles, because when I look at stories, and certainly with We Gathered Together, a lot of times as a writer and a creator, I'm more interested in the juxtaposition and overlapping of characters and events, almost as much or more so than those individual characters or events on their own. So to me, Sarah Josepha Hale, this person who you never thought would do anything, she was using this role as an editor to, interact with presidents, like Lincoln, who, helped her establish Thanksgiving, but also to promote writers who had never been heard of before. So, one of my favorite stories that, I came across when I was working on this book was, here's this woman who, no one would have ever thought she would have ended up the editor of one of the most influential magazines of the 19th century, but there she was. And it wasn't just about what to wear and what to cook and how to hostess. It was about those things, but it was also about how to educate your children and what to read. And her magazine, reviewed this very young writer that people hadn't heard of. And, she said, well, the prose is a little boyish and it wants this and it wants that, but he shows signs of genius. And, he could be as great a poet as Shelley. And it turns out her daughter, David, was going to West Point with this particular writer. And her daughter, David, writes Sarah Josepha Hale and says, I showed that review to my classmate, Edgar Allan Poe. And this is Sarah Josepha Hale, who, no formal education, 19th century, no vote, no official voice, who used her place, as an editor in a magazine to raise these other voices. And that began her writer-editor relationship with Edgar Allan Poe that lasted till the end of his life. The Cask of Amontillado was, first published in her ladies' magazine. And I love to think of these 19th century women in their parlors, looking at dress patterns and then suddenly reading about somebody being walled up in a crypt. It's like, yeah, go, woo!
And they keep thinking they're hearing these hearts beating at night. They can't sleep.
Boom, 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 boom. And, we talk about influencers today. This was a woman who wrote Mary Had a Little Lamb.
It blows my mind that somebody wrote that. Of course somebody wrote that, but you're like, no, that.
What's hilarious is it's so long. When I looked at the original printing, Mary Had a Little Lamb, so many stanzas. And I thought I learned 2 when I was a kid. We're putting them all in the book. They're all in the book. The book We Gather Together has all of them because I couldn't believe it. Popularized white wedding dresses, popularized the Christmas tree, popularized the phrase domestic science. Just so many things. And yet, she used this platform as opposed to, I don't mean to, speak ill of influencers today or whatever, but she used her platform also to raise money for charities, to draw attention to unknown writers, to anthologize and promote female writers, women writers who would not get that sort of attention. And yes, also petitioned presidents to create a National Day of Thanks.
Right.
And Abraham Lincoln in 1863. In fact, today, oh my gosh, today, on this day in 1863 was the Gettysburg Address.
Oh, shit.
Today.
Boom.
And
wow.
A week from today, the 26th, November 26th, 1863 was the first presidentially proclaimed Thanksgiving that continued. It started our string of uninterrupted November Thanksgivings to the present day. Washington proclaimed a national Thanksgiving, when he was in office, but that wasn't continued. Lincoln answered Sarah Josepha Hale's call, established it a week from today, and we have it all the way now till today. And I just, Jesus, I was researching this woman, looking at all this shit she done, and I just thought, oh my God, what have I been doing with my time? Oh my God, I've just got to get on this stick because, oh goodness gracious.
I was so affected by that. And obviously I feel the same, that I just knocked my grandfather's photograph off of my radio.
Oh, hi, Grandpa.
Hi, Grandpa. How interesting, though, that the first president of these United States proclaimed a national day of giving thanks.
Yeah.
And yet it takes, see, this is also like, this is so, my dad was in politics, and my mom and he and my sister and I have all been activists all our lives. But one of the things that is often missed is it's not just about saying the thing. You actually have to get in the weeds and do the thing.
Yes.
Like, so he proclaimed it, but then it took Sarah to get somebody's ear, somebody of power, happened to be a president, probably helpful, and to say, do it. We have to name it. We have to plan it. You have to proclaim a day. And it's like, that's the boring stuff sometimes for people. Actually getting in the nitty gritty and setting the details, but that you need that.
For years. I mean, she wrote about Thanksgiving in a novel she published in 1827, which, by the way, I mean, for someone who didn't go to school, to publish a novel that got enough attention that she ended up the editor of a magazine was pretty impressive. She wrote this decadent description of Thanksgiving in that novel, and then just began writing in her magazine from her editor's perch about what Thanksgiving should be. It would be great if it were a unifying holiday. She was all about her father, again, was a veteran of the Revolutionary War. She was all about the Union, and she could see, as the 19th century progressed, she could see the Union coming apart. And she wrote governors, she wrote ambassadors, she wrote the heads of territories, but she knew if this was going to be a national holiday, she had to write presidents. And she tried Pierce, and she tried Fillmore, and she tried Buchanan, and finally it was Abraham Lincoln who said, yeah, we're going to proclaim a national day of thanks. And she said, that year and years after, before she died, it needs to be a congressional act or else this isn't going to stick. And she never saw that. That didn't happen till World War II. And for me, as a writer, when I look at sort of what moves people, to me, the idea of a unifying holiday about thanks coming to pass in the middle of the Civil War. I mean, we're divided today, but I mean, the Civil War, this was as extreme as it got.
It's kind of in the title.
Yeah, and that was this, there was this unifying holiday, and there were so many. What was so interesting to me, and I talk about the intersection of events, is how many people kind of figured into this. You had Sojourner Truth, going door to door, raising money for Thanksgiving meals for troops. You had Frederick Douglass's sons fighting in the 54th, the first Black regiment, in the Civil War, and that was actually partially conceived during a Thanksgiving dinner. And there were so many amazing just intersections and really moving moments surrounding Thanksgiving. And then there were really crazy ones, like Thanksgiving in 1918 during the Spanish flu, which I wrote about before all this happened. And then we're editing the book and I'm talking to my editor and I'm like, okay, I need more time with the epilogue because it's a little crazy. And it's all, I'm a history nerd, but I mean, it's always so interesting to look back at these moments and how people just struggled through them. And looking at, the Spanish flu in 1918, and that Thanksgiving, it's pretty inspiring when you look at what, we're about to go through, a week from now, and a week from now, actually, the 26th was the Thanksgiving Day that Lincoln proclaimed because of Sarah Josepha Hale's letter to him, the 26th of November.
And what year was that?
1863.
63. So I'm terrible at math. So what
So am I.
is the anniversary?
73, 23. It's like 100.
Carry the thing and
do the math with the
okay. It's the anniversary. That's amazing.
Yes, exactly. If it were 2063, that would be easy, but it's not.
It's not easy. I'm an actor. I don't have math skills.
But it was this day. It was this
Right.
coming Thursday. It was that day. Yeah.
You also bring up some stuff in the book that I think is admirable too, and necessary. Admirable. I mean, whatever. But it's great that you do because the Thanksgiving that we traditionally celebrated is problematic for a large contingent of our population of Americans, and you acknowledge that Native Americans specifically. I'm not trying to obscure, but you acknowledge that, and you also talk about how malleable it can be, and partially because a day of giving thanks is not an American idea. It's something that is just human, probably from the very first harvesters, which is the very first people who. Yeah. Anyway, I thought that what you wrote about that was not only it was just moving, and it was acknowledging problems, and it was acknowledging that doesn't mean that we I don't know. I'm going to stop putting words in your mouth and just ask you if you want to talk about that, because that was, especially given this time we're in right now, where people are trying to come to terms with where we are, and how we are culpable in certain things, and how we can move forward in a positive way, and but in a way that acknowledges culpability too, if that makes any sense. And you can correct me if you want.
No, yeah, I mean, when I had come across Sarah Josepha Hill's story years ago and thought she was just fascinating as an individual and as a part of media history, and as a woman in the media and a writer. And yes, this woman who had petitioned presidents to create a National Day of Thanks. But I don't really write biographies. So I wasn't going to do that. So I do what I always do, which is create like an idea file. I just stick stuff away. I have Post-its, I have notebooks, I have all this sort of stuff. And it's like, this piqued my curiosity. This goes over here. I like the idea that she had intersected with Lincoln and Poe and Ralph Waldo Emerson and Lydia Maria Child and, the Civil War and all these things. But that didn't quite do it for me yet. As far as like, when you choose to do a book, you've really got to be all in, because they stay in your life for so long. And then, I frankly, I, as a person, as a human, I pay attention to, I like science. I was actually a science major in college. And there's been a lot of research in the last decade or so about gratitude and the positive effects on, mental health, emotional health, physical health of having some sort of gratitude practice. And I thought, you know what, that could be the linchpin to kind of connect this book. And that's when I started to think I can do this, but we get what ended up to be, we gather together, and I became really interested in the idea of just gratitude as a compelling human instinct. I mean, people have been saying thank you since they've been walking the planet in all corners of the globe. And, there have been harvest festivals, and there have been the word Thanksgiving goes back hundreds and hundreds of years ago, well before anybody was on this, continent. So I started looking at all of that. And, what was interesting to me with regard to our Thanksgiving, which the idea that there was ever a first is just, it just doesn't make any sense. And the story we grew up with, I think you and I are around the same age.
That's very kind of you.
I think we might be. The idea that were there pilgrims in 1621? Yes. Did they at some point, share a meal in the fall of 1621 with the Wampanoag tribe? Yes. Were those people invited? No proof of that. Was that proclaimed a Thanksgiving? No proof of that. Did that relationship turn out well for all of the indigenous peoples on this continent? No, it did not. And there were so many other events that took place on this continent and elsewhere with regard to just giving thanks and saying thank you. And what really struck me was when Sarah Josepha Hale wrote Lincoln, and all of those proclamations that he issued, that Jackson issued, that Grant issued, that Hayes issued, that they said nothing about commemorating any specific event. It had nothing to do with that. She basically just, giving thanks and thanksgivings, which were proclaimed for battle victories, for one of my favorite things was just coming across this entry in John Adams' diary where he says, Thanksgiving proclaimed for the repeal of the Stamp Act. It was like, yeah, and, when Washington proclaimed Thanksgiving in his first term, he went to the prison and gave money so guys could have, a little more ale and a little more food. It didn't have anything to do with commemorating the story that we were told.
Right.
And so I just keep thinking, like, we have this great real story, true story that we can share, that doesn't, exploit the original occupants of this continent. And, it's something that is so universal, and at a time when we are so divided and we are looking for reasons to come together, everybody can be thankful if somebody loves them and they love someone. Everyone can be thankful if they have their health. Everyone can be thankful if they have a roof over their head and they have food on their table. These are all things that we can unite around and have gratitude for. And I think this year, when we really got to pare down and focus and be safe and, not be probably as busy as we used to be, kind of getting down to that essence of just, thank you, is a really great thing. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know.
No, I completely agree. I think you're absolutely right. And I do see that Lynn has jumped back on. So I'm wondering if that means that we need to stop talking. But but I have so many things I want to say about what you just said, but it's but also other people might too. So
Yes. So should we answer, Lynn, do you want us to answer questions? What do you want us to do? Or do you want us
Well,
to?
I'm curious about what Kelly has to say, because I think that's really great that you wrote this book and kind of changed the conversation. Although, it's fun to make hats out of construction paper for pilgrim hats. So
Draw a hand out of your mega turkey.
I made a
think
turkey.
Goes way
that's how
back.
that story started.
Turkey's cool. Turkey goes way back. So do cranberries. Yeah.
I like that. See, now cranberries are the least important thing about my my particular holiday that I've been celebrating for the last 20 years. That potluck Friendsgiving thing that we do in Brooklyn, which started as a thing when we had no money, we couldn't fly back home. Carolyn, my wife, was from LA, I was from Oregon. We couldn't fly anywhere, and so we just had a couple people who couldn't. It was like we called it the Orphans Thanksgiving. And then it grew and it became this thing with regulars. And this year it's really heartbreaking because we can't do that. We're going to do a very pared down version outside, depending on what the CDC guidelines are. But oh shoot, I was going to say something that was really, really insightful and interesting. And now I've forgotten.
Okay, my husband just posted how to make construction paper turkeys out of your hands in the chat. He's really super contributing right now. Yeah.
It's so fascinating. But I was also going to say, but one of the things that you were talking about is why do the question you sort of are fundamentally asking, I think, and again, always question me because I'm not trying to put words in anyone's mouths, but why do we need to create that? We all want a mythology. Mythology is very important.
Yeah.
But why do we need to create a specific, and I think I have an answer, but a specific anthology that's actually not, that's very unlikely to have been true when we have wonderful mythology here that is actually based in fact. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I do actually, because I was asked in an interview, well, I love this legend that we have. Why do we need this other story? And I said, well, this one over here is true.
Yeah.
This one isn't. and neither is perfect. I mean, because I think we do have a real tendency when looking at characters, and you have played complex characters.
It's very generous of you.
Yeah, no, we have a tendency to beatify or vilify, right? Especially with history. And some of the most compelling characters are the anti-heroes, are the ones who were like, oh, I really love this aspect of them, but oh my God, that they are a total jerk over here. And none of it's not saying that there's some sort of perfect, unassailable story here. I'm just saying this is what really happened.
Right.
And this other thing, that's not quite the truth. And it's actually hurtful to a part of our population. So why not go with the true thing that we can, dissect and criticize or whatever, but at least we're like dealing with fact, as opposed to things that are not so friendly to everybody. And there's a more inclusive an inclusive, forgiving, welcoming aspect to the true story, I think. And that has to be passed down to kids. I am nowhere near the first person who has pointed out that the story we get fed as kids is not true. But the fact of the matter is we tell kids this and then we don't revisit, we can't contextualize it for them because they're 7 or 8 years old. And I loved making those turkeys. I loved it. I loved making the hats. But we don't go back to them in like AP history and say, okay, we're going to go the whole Thanksgiving thing. We just sort of leave it. And, yeah. So I mean, in a way, it's not about saying, hey, that story's wrong. It's just saying, hey, isn't this an interesting story about gratitude and giving thanks and the universality of being grateful? And can't we all get around that? Isn't that a nice thing to feel? I mean, look at these people. We're in a horrible time right now. And look at these people like, I don't know, like Jose Andres, you know what I mean? Like these restaurant owners and people who are just feeding people, and you need to give thanks and just be appreciative. And, you know, the Tom Moore, that guy in England, walking with his walker, doing laps in his backyard to raise money for the health service to fight COVID. I mean, these are beautiful, beautiful, inspiring moments for which we should all give thanks. And the idea to me that there is a day, one day, that this entire country comes together and says, this is the day we give thanks, that to me can still be a really inspiring, wonderful event without whatever stories we were fed. Just doing that is a timeless, ageless concept that has incredible, beautiful power. That's all I'm saying.
And we can own that. We can take that and own that and transform that. And I do think, I think that has happened with a lot of people. I think that what Thanksgiving means to people is very different than it may have meant 50 years ago. And we can create our own traditions. It's much easier to create your own traditions. And it is not necessarily, and some people may quibble with this depending on the families they have, but not necessarily family based. And I love my family and I love my time with my family, but I also love that my tradition has become about my extended family. And what we said in the very first one we did, the very first Orphans Thanksgiving, was bring one dish that you can't live without, that your mom made, your dad made, that you made, whatever, just one dish. And so the variety of food was, I mean, we had turkey and my wife got this great weird mold cartoon looking tofu turkey that was actually kind of delicious. And we made greens, and we had stuff from Puerto Rico, and we had stuff from the Middle East, and we had like but because it wasn't about maybe that's why cranberry sauce got pushed to the side. Also, it kind of sucks, but I won't fight you.
Mine doesn't, but go ahead. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. But you go ahead, sir. But it is in a weird way, in a particularly American way, it is an individualistic, malleable, what you make of it holiday. And I think, and that to me, and it's still about family, but it can be about a chosen family and as I said before, intentional. But that to me makes it particularly beautiful. That's me.
And I mean, it's like you can see, and what I tried to show in the book is that when you go back to like harvest festivals in ancient Rome, coming all the way through Thanksgiving in the 21st century, the idea of these ceremonies surrounding giving thanks, including our Thanksgiving, have evolved, and it can evolve again to be more. And we already we have Friendsgiving, we have, we have Giving Tuesday, we have all of these wonderful things. And it can evolve again to be a reflection of the best that we want to be, of what we want to put forth as a culture into this world. We can do that. I mean, we already sort of are, but we can choose to make this holiday that is essentially centered on thanks, however you interpret that, to be, inclusive and grateful and welcoming and joyful and all of these things. And that to me, you know, I want to feel good about Thanksgiving. I love Thanksgiving. I want to feel good about Thanksgiving. That's what I want.
And the other thing, I think the fact that it is fundamentally not a religious holiday.
Totally. Yeah.
Which means that you can celebrate it any way you want. You can bring religion into it if you want to, whatever your religion is. You can keep it out. It is a humanistic holiday, which makes me love it. So the last thing I'm going to say, Carolyn and I have like 2 social events of the year that and one is our potluck Thanksgiving, and one is our giant stoop sale in the middle of the summer. And we have tons of friends who come, and we just spread it over the entire day. But it's all about, again, ensemble, gathering together. Everything you're talking about in this book, that's what ultimately makes you a happier person, a more fulfilled person. That makes a life. The community you create, yes, family, of course, but also chosen family.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this year is a good year to reach out. I'm looking forward to reaching out to folks because we have this big blowout all weekend long. A lot of times it doesn't permit me to necessarily connect with people who aren't physically in my house, but a lot of people aren't going to be physically in my house this year. So I'm kind of shifting to that intention of I'm going to connect with people I love and I connect with at other times of the year, but because I'm going to have a little more peace and quiet in the house, just kind of connecting with those people and, you know, zeroing in on that joy and that sharing and that inclusivity and, you know, enjoying my favorite holiday in a different way. Okay. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Lynn. Sorry, Lynn.
This has been so much fun. I wish we had more time because it's
no worries.
It feels so good now. You know, I've learned. You know, this is a great story about a woman that deserves to be more well known, and so we've got history, and it's also really inspirational, and it's
true.
And it's true.
And it's true.
Positive, and it's inspiring. And we also have signed copies. If y'all
That's right.
So we are very grateful to Denise for doing that, and we also sell them.
Please support your local bookstores. Square Books is awesome. Please support indies right now. Please, yes.
Thank you.
100% agree.
Thank y'all. Thank you so much for doing this, and I hope you have a beautiful, happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. I'm so sorry we didn't get to any of your questions.
We'll get to them. So yes, we should figure out a way to get to them. Maybe.
Yeah. Thank you all for being here.
Thank
you, Denise, for asking me to be part of this because I'm such a fan of yours.
Kelly for being game. Yay. Thank you, Square Books.
Thank you, Square Books.
Thanks.
Support Square Books, indie books.